It's far from over. The all-out offensive of the Philippine military against the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, or BIFF, rages on. The yield, an ammunition factory from the former strongholds of the rebels. But the war has taken its toll on ordinary people. Some municipalities in Maguindanao are now under a state of calamity as over 40,000 locals flee from the war zone.
Wala pa tulong sila sa amin. Tingnan mo, taas ng araw, kapilang.
Kahapon nga, nagpalaro kami dyan eh. Para lang sa yung mga plane dyan sa itaas, yung mga bata hindi nila maramdaman yung takot.
Back in Manila, legislators fast-tracked the passage of the controversial Bangsamoro Basic Law that was stalled in the aftermath of the Mama Zapano bloodbath. They are urged to do so before President Aquino's State of the Nation address on July 30th. Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. Our debate question for tonight: are you in favor of the government's all-out offensive against the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters? Good evening, I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and joining me tonight is Malu Tequilla, and this is Opposing Views. Joining us tonight in our discussion is Anti-Crime and Terrorism Community Involvement and Support Party List Representative Congressman Samuel Pagdilao. Sam, good evening and thank you for joining us here at Opposing Views. What are your quick thoughts on this? Do you think that, are you in favor of the government's all-out offensive against the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters? In 30 seconds, what is a summary of your position?
Yes, thank you, Rod, and good evening. I do support government's policy of going after BIFF. The ongoing offensive is something that government should do, especially against an armed group, an enemy of the state, and a crime group.
Okay, all right. And also on the opposing side is the lead convener of the 1BANGSAmoro movement, Kabangsa Alan Balangi. Kabangsa Alan, good evening.
Good evening. Maraming salamat.
What are your thoughts on this, Kabangsa Alan? Do you think that, are you in favor of the government's all-out offensive against the BIFF?
Actually, ang all-out offensive dyan sa Maguindanao, the mere victim dyan ay yung civilian. Nakikita natin na more than 40 civilians, more than 20 families were played doon sa kanilang mga kabahayan. Kung saan-saan sila napunta, nakita natin. Kasi hindi tulad dito sa Metro Manila, may mga shelter tayo. Sila doon lang sa mga gilid. So nakakaawa. Kaya ang posisyon natin, dapat itigil yan. Huwag na pahabain. Maawa naman sila doon sa civilian. Ang gera, wala namang panalo dyan. Lahat talo. Lalo na yung mga civilians.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So we'll start off the discussion. We'll start off with Kong Sam. Do you think that an all-out offensive is justified? And is this equivalent to basically an all-out war? Are we talking terminology here, or essentially the government is saying we're going after them and until they surrender? Is it, and if so, is that justified?
Well, first, government's offensive against BIFF is perfectly justified in consideration of what happened first in Mama Zapano. They were involved in the massacre of SAF troopers. And in the past, they have been involved in criminal activities, terroristic activities, and therefore it's government's right or obligation to go and run after these groups who are enemies of the state, and they also affect adversely the lives of people residing in those places.
That is, without the war, those civilians are already affected. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
What do you say to that, Kabangsa? Yung sinasabi ni Kong Sam, affected na rin naman yung mga lives ng mga tao doon. Kasi yung BIFF mismo, silang gumagawa ng mga attacks. No? So, they're an enemy of the state.
Actually, sa amin, ang concern namin dyan, actually yung civilian, bakit hindi muna natin hintayin yung mga investigation na lumabas dyan? So after that, tugisin na kung sino yung dapat tugisin. Yun yung aming position dyan. Sapagkat ang paniniwala namin, habang nagkakagira dyan sa Mindanao, ay mas nakaka-trigger ng sentiment doon sa mga kabataan.
mga
Lalong-lalo
sentiment,
na yung
oo.
mga
Lalo
kabataan.
na mga kabataan,
Oo,
oo.
kung saan sila yung malaking tinatamaan, sila yung natitigil sa pag-aral, nagiging hopeless sila. So wala na silang choice kung hindi makisama at makibaka doon sa armadong grupo. Yan yung worry natin dyan sa Mindanao.
Okay. Kong Sam, just a short addendum to what Rod asked. Do you think the strategy of declaring an all-out offensive is a manner or a mechanism by which government is trying to decipher who is MI, who is BIFF? Is that a good strategy on the ground?
Well, that could also be a strategy because, you know, it's nebulous, no? Nebulous insofar as to establish a distinction between MILF and BIFF because on the ground, ang hirap niyan, di ba?
Di mo alam
They're one family,
yes.
di ba?
That's right, no? So they're related by blood. No? Yung nangyari doon sa Mampas no, is a classic example. Papasok doon yung ating law enforcement to enforce a, you know, a duty or an order coming from a court, no? To arrest a wanted terrorist, international terrorist. Anong ginawa? So all of them descended upon these SAF troopers, no? Regardless of to what group they belong, no? Whether BIFF, MILF, private armed groups, Pintakasi ang tawag
yeah,
nun.
that one.
Talagang wala na. So, judging from that, nakikita mo, ano ba to? Hindi mo na talaga ma-distinguish. You know? So right now, this offensive against BIFF is to run after those who were involved, no, in the massacre. Is that justified? Yes, because right now, would our normal process, no, or our justice system, can it be applied like when you investigate, are these people going to submit themselves to the jurisdiction of the
Apparently,
investigative
no.
authorities?
Yeah,
No?
yeah, that-
So,
and
dyan pa lang,
may
may
problema
hurdle
na.
na. So how
Yes.
about, you know, a trial, no? Because our concept of a justice, obtaining
sa
justice,
Sharia,
is we go through a process, like trial, where a court is involved. So would you expect that these guys will subject themselves to the authority and jurisdiction of our courts? I don't think so. No?
Isa lang, sir. Is there a difference between an all-out offensive and an all-out war? What do we exactly have on the ground?
Well, right now it's an offensive, no? Like to be technical about it, mahirap kasi pag sinabi mong war, well, a declaration of war, no?
Wala naman
It's an act
declaration,
of Congress, di ba?
Yes,
And
yes.
usually a war between two states, no? So, and it needs an act of Congress to be able to declare and make a war a legal act of a state, no? But this one is parang kung lang to eh, yun yung
Clearing
ginagamit na
operations.
mga term lang, no? It's an offensive, and you know, when you say we are on a war against crime, di ba? So you don't have to declare, you know, it doesn't need a congressional act to declare that, no? But it's actually a state where the government pursues, you know, an action where it should run continuously against a group that's involved in a commission of crime, right? So you have to, this one, what we're seeing actually is, I'd like to see this as an offensive, no? As an offensive against a lawless group.
Against a continuing crime, I suppose, no?
Oh, yeah.
A
A
continuing
group that
crime,
continues to commit crimes,
Okay.
no, against the state.
Kabangsalan, anong masasabi mo doon? Kasi yun nga may stuck tayo between a government na, sige, usap muna tayo, or talagang hanapin na natin yung mga lawless elements, yung mga peace spoilers na sinasabi nila, mga lawless elements. Ang hinahabol ng gobyerno dito ay mga tao talaga na who are enemies of the state, who are criminals. Ano masasabi mo dyan?
Actually, yung paghabol naman dyan sa mga criminal, wala naman walang questionably dyan, walang problema dyan. Ang problema lang natin dito, tulad nung sinabi ni Governor Mangudadato, ang tingin niya dito isang all-out war. Nung last week, ang declaration is all-out offensive against BIFF. Kanina, nakikinig ako sa radio, parang ang pronouncement ay all-out law enforcement. Parang nag-iba yung, pero ang, oo. So you could just imagine that. Pero ang kinatatakutan natin dyan, yung sinabi ni Congressman, na baka magkaroon na naman dyan ng pintakasi. Sana hindi mangyari na maraming malagas sa ating mga BIFF, sa civilian, maging sa ating mga kasundaluhan. baka naman sabihin dyan, nagtulong-tulungan yung ibang grupo dyan. Kasi ang mga tao dyan, grupo dyan, hindi lang BIFF, andyan din yung mga private army, andyan din yung mga civilian na may mga armas. Oo, andyan din yung MILF, of course. So, yan yung kinatatakutan natin. Kasi kung ating babalikan, yung all-out war policy ni former Presidente Irap noong year 2000, kung saan that time I was the one of doon sa nanguna, na tumindig sa kalsada para ipanawagan yung pagtitigil ng war. Sinasabi natin na itigil na ito, bumalik na kayo sa negotiating table. Oo. Nakita natin na wala naman kinahitnan yung all-out war ni Irap. Hindi totoo yung sinasabi niya na napulbos niya ang MILF. Bakit tila mas lumakas ang kanilang puwersa? Mas dumami ang kanilang membro at sumisimpatya sa kanila. Yan yung kinatatakutan natin dito. Pagpatuloy yung all-out offensive na yan, dahil doon sa mga kabataan na natitigil doon sa kanilang pag-aaral, baka maingganyo sila.
That's a good point, no, Kabangsa Alan, and I'd like to get the rejoinder of Congressman Sam. However, we need to take a short break. Opposing views. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. We have with us Congressman Samuel Pagdilao of the Anti-Crime and Terrorism Community Involvement and Support Partylist, and Alan Balangi, lead convener of the 1BANGSAmoro movement. And also with me, of course, is Malu Tequia. And our debate question for tonight: are you in favor of the government's all-out offensive against the Bangsamoro Islamic freedom fighters? Now, just before the break, Kong Sam, Alan was making a point that if you have an all-out offensive against the BAFF, what's going to happen is that there are several other parties involved. Now, we have the private armies, the civilians who are armed, and in a way, I think what Kabangsa Alan was saying is that there will be a spillover of this offensive and might affect a lot more people. So what are your thoughts on that? Again, his point is that there's going to be a spillover and it might escalate the violence and affect more people.
Yeah, the way I see it, no, this is actually a golden opportunity for MILF to show that they are apart, no? They are separate, and they are even the enemies of these groups, no? Who are opposed to their views or their stand on pushing for the BBL. You know? In fact, and of course, this is an opportunity as well, you know, or a duty for government to really pursue and seize the moment to go after criminal elements, no? To armed groups na to, and obligation naman ng ating gobyerno yan. So, I've read, no, in the papers that actually MILF had stood, no, aside to give way for the armed forces and the PNP to go after BIFF. So, in this sense, maganda itong nangyayari, di ba? Kasi hindi pwedeng ma-justify yung existence ng isang criminal group, terrorist group, just because our fear is that when we go and strike against them, all-out offensive against them, it's going to draw all the rest, no? And magkakaroon ng spillover. Okay? That could be a possibility, but you know, that cannot justify, you know, going after these rebel groups or armed groups or criminal groups, no? Which is what is government is doing now. Nag-set aside yung MILF, no? Maganda yan, di ba? Nakikita natin ngayon yung sincerity nila sa sinasabi nila. No? That's
Huwag tayo makialam dyan.
Oh, huwag tayo makialam yan. Kalaban namin, we're separate from them, di ba? Now we're talking peace with government. And these are spoilers, no? Itong mga BIFF. Clearly, talaga naman, there are spoilers, no? They're doing something to spoil the ongoing peace talks between government and MILF. Now, I do agree, no, that in a situation like this, in conflict areas, talaga naapektuhan yung ating mga civilians, no? There are really casualties. And government should deal with it, no? Like they do, or how they do it during a calamity, no? So may mga evacuation plans for civilians, and they take care of the civilians who are obviously na dislocate ito, no, and affected by the ongoing conflict. But kung kailangang gawin ng gobyerno to, no, i-perpetrate nila itong offensive na to, then they have to come up with a holistic plan to include, of course, taking care of those civilians. No? And I'm sure that's government's obligation, and they're doing it. No? Much like the way they handle disasters. No?
Okay. Let me take off from what you said on casualties and displaced families. Kaalan, can you categorically say that the BIFF and Abu Sayyaf and all these other groups, lawless elements?
Siguro I'm not in a position na sabihin na yan yung mga lawless element. Unang-una po, mayroon tayong kapulisan, former policemen, mayroon tayong kasundaluhan. Sila mismo yung nagsasabi dyan. Oo. Kasi on our part as a civilian, doon lang kami nakatutok doon sa concern ng mga civilian. Oo. Pero nakikita natin kung totoo man yung ginagawa nila na kunyari yung pamumugot. Yan ay masasabi natin un-Islamic yan. Oo.
In that regard, hindi ba dapat ang appeal ng 1BANGSAmoro movement doon rin sa, hindi lang sa gobyerno, doon din sa mga kasama na sa tingin ng Estado, lawless sila. Hindi sila ang kasama natin sa peace process, kundi sila yung nanggugulo. Hindi ba pwedeng ang appeal pareho sa Estado at doon sa mga Muslim na ayaw yung kapayapaan?
Napakalinaw po, it is very clear sa aming mga Muslim, bawal yung mga ganon. Oo. Kahit nga yung mabanggit ko lang, yung ISIS na sinasabi, o maging yung ating mga Muslim scholars, sinasabi na talagang unacceptable sa aming relihiyon. Hindi gawain ng matinong Muslim yung mga kahalintulad na gawain. Kaya nga, maraming pag-aral. Kami mismo, may mga pag-aral na ang ISIS ay hindi naman talaga yan mga Muslim. Kundi yan ay ginagamit lang sila para sirain yung image ng Muslim, para ma-justify yung panghihimasok ng ilang estado dyan tulad ng Amerika. So napakalinaw po sa aming mga Muslim yan. Kaya kung ating nakikita, wala tayong nakikita dito sa Metro Manila na nakukumbinsi ng ISIS na sumama sa kanila.
Now, alam natin na ang MILF at ang government, there are talks, di ba? Itong BBL nga, itong Bangsamoro Basic Law, malapit na, nandyan na, no? Na medyo naamoy na natin, pero nangyari ngayon sa Mama Sapano, and ngayon, malinaw na sinasabi ng BIFF, hindi namin sinusuporta itong, at least, ang pag-usap ng MILF and the government, di ba? Kaya sila nag-aaway na ng BIFF and MILF. So, masasabi ba natin categorically na may difference talaga ang BIFF and MILF? And the reason why I ask that is that yung nga yung sinasabing all-out war or all-out offensive, no, ni Kong Sam. Kasi kung mag-all-out offensive ka, ang tingin kong simply looking at it, no, from point of view of a layperson, mangyari niyan pag nag-declare ang government, no, siya all-out offensive tayo, yung mga hindi sumasanib sa BIFF, siyempre sabihin nila, hindi ako BIFF, tatabi ako. So, ang mangyayari niyan, yung mga talagang BIFF lang, yung mga talagang kumakalaban sa gobyerno, sila lang matitira doon, mag-isa. Yung mga hindi kasanib ng BIFF, aalis. So, in a way, yun ang sinasabi na parang we will find out kung sino talaga yung mga peace spoilers. Don't you think that that's justified? Para lang ma-weed out natin yung mga talagang kalaban ng Estado.
It's very clear. Nakita natin yung pangyayari ngayon. Pag natunto nila yung isang kampo, sinasabi nilang kampo, wala naman tao. Ibig sabihin, yung sinasabi natin, the spoiler of peace, ay talagang tumatakbo sila. Wala naman tayong nababalitaan na matinding bakbakan dyan. Kung ang ating titingnan, yung television, hindi naman sila nakakalapit doon mismo sa sinasabing bakbakan area. So ngayon, ang isang problema dyan, sabi natin, ito ngayon, ang MILF nakikipag-usap sa gobyerno kung saan parang abot kamay na yung kapayapaan dyan sa Mindanao na pinaniniwalaan namin na iyan ay baga consensual na tinalima ng mamamayang Moro. Oo. Kung saan dumaan sa mahusay na proseso at konsultasyon. Oo. So, yun nga yung aming worried ngayon na dahil sa pangyayari, una yung sa mamasapan, no, dumagdag itong all-out offensive, baka maging all-out war, ay tila mapag-iwanan na yung pagtalakay ng Bangsamoro Basic Law.
Kong, do you agree with that?
Mag-react lang ako, no? Walang tao sa mga kampo, ano sabi ng ating kaibigan. Yun ang nagiging problema natin because itong mga taong to ay naninirahan doon sa mga communities. No? So nakikita natin dito, BIFF ka man, MILF ka man, private armed groups, magkakasama kayo.
sila.
No? So that's why it is actually really more of a law enforcement action against those who commit, atrocities or crimes, against our state. No? Kaya doon tayo namumroblema. Like yung SAF, for instance, they went there to carry out a law enforcement action. Okay? But, ano nangyari? Diba? So, lawlessness ang umiiral pag gano'n, di ba?
Okay. Now I want you to, I know you want to respond there, Kabangsaalan, but we need to take a short break again. We'll talk more about the military's all-out offensive after a short break. Meanwhile, you can join the debate via Facebook at facebook.com/opposingviews on 9TV or tweet your thoughts at opposing_views. Use the hashtag OVBIFF. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. We have with us Congressman Samuel Pagdilao of the Anti-Crime and Terrorism Community Involvement and Support Partylist, and Alan Balangi, lead convener of the 1BANGSAmoro movement. And also with me, of course, is Malu Tikia. Our debate question for tonight: are you in favor of the government's all-out offensive against the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters? Now, just before we took a break, Kong Sam, you're making a point responding to Alan's statement that when there were attacks by the government forces, wala naman sila nakita sa mga base, sa parang camp, no, ng mga camp. And then you're making a point that hindi naman to parang campo versus campo, yung parang minsan these are people who are sometimes farmers, and hindi naman sila all out soldiers and all that. Can you clarify that? And we'd like to get the response of Alan.
Right. Ang nakikita natin, when we don't see camps, no, or we see camps that are empty, ibig sabihin nandun rin sila, they, at some point,
Somewhere in that area.
nandun lang sila sa community, they live. No? So, it seems that they are actually united. No? So, when they unite themselves in peace, no? So they'll have to pursue yung kung anong dapat gawin nila. Like, if it's going to be a lawless society, no, because they tolerate yung mga gumagawa ng kalokohan sa kanila. So, anong mangyayari dyan? So, kung nakikita natin, they live in the community, so dapat sila na rin. If they want to get involved in a war, no, kasi yung mga kampo nila, pagka merong pagkakataon, talagang pumupunta sila doon just to make themselves or to show off na talagang they are an army, di ba? Grupo talaga sila lumalaban sa Estado. Pero kung yun, instead of a unity to fight the government, why don't they unite themselves, no, as one Bangsamoro people in peace? Diba? Like right now, gusto ko lang dalhin niya dun sa ongoing peace talks. Ano? Right now, our government is talking peace with only one group. Diba? So, hindi ito masasabing inclusive, ano, of all the other groups. Mabuti nga, yung 1BANGSAmoro movement, I think that's a movement that will draw all the groups,
stakeholders,
no? One and united, ano, for peace. Tama po ba yan?
Tama po yun.
Pero tingin mo ba this offensive is similar to sa naging incident natin kay President Estrada dati, yung in 2000, no? Nag-declare siya ng all-out war. Tingin mo, is it the same, and what have we learned from that? What have we learned from that incident?
Ganito kasi yan, kaya nga ang aming panawagan ay itigil na sana yung all-out offensive na yan. Kasi pag tumagal pa yan, mas mag-escalate pa yan.
Talagang di maiwasan. Tingin mo hindi maiwasan.
Unang-una, tama yung sinabi ni Congressman na pwedeng BIFF at the same time civilian pag natuntun na yung mga kampo nila, walang tao, oo. Pwedeng BIFF din, pag nakita mo, sasabihin nila, oy, hindi ako BIFF, ako ay isang civilian. Kaya mahirap yan. Oo, kaya ang dapat, solusyon dyan, kausapin yung mga yan. Oo, kung ano ba talaga yung gusto nila.
Paano natin kausapin sila kung di nga malinaw kung sino sila?
Actually, ang mga yan, mayroon ding mga ideolohiya yan. Oo, alam natin lahat na yung mga yan ay galing din yan sa MILF. Kung ating natatandaan, ang MILF, nulis dan Chairman Iqbal, sinasabi ng ang original na ipinaglalaban ay paano magkaroon ng right to self-determination. Independensya, yung kanilang original na baga ipinaglalaban. So iniwanan nila yon, tinanggap na nila itong Bangsamoro entity sana na nakapaloob pa rin sa gobyerno ng Pilipinas. Yung sinasabi nila na ito ay hihiwalay, hindi naman siguro. Ang question...
Ang tanong ko lang doon, magkakaroon ba tayo ng panahon na titigil na yung revolving door? Na ang kinausap natin, dati MNLF, naging MILF, tapos ngayon, kasi parang ang nangyayari, every time na nagkaroon ng peace accord doon sa isa, meron na namang splinter group. Doon sa konsepto mo ng One Bangsamoro movement, magkakaroon ba ng panahon na titigil ang pag-splinter ng bawat Muslim group?
Sa tingin ko, pag naging successful itong Bangsamoro Bisiklo, titigil na yan. Why? Unang-una, magkakaroon sila ng kapangyarihan na magkakaroon ng hindi naman sariling kapulisan. Kasi under pa rin yan sa Philippine National Police. Ang MILF kasi, siya yung pinakamalaking grupo na kumakatawan sa Moro people. Yung ibang lowlist na tinatawag na grupo dyan, tulad ng BIFF at saka yung Abu Sayyaf, maliit lang na grupo yan. So siguro sa tingin ko, kayang-kaya yan ng MILF. Pag sila ang naupo dyan, pwede nila daanin sa matiwasay na pakikipag-usap kasi magkakamag-anak, magkakaibigan yan. Oo, pwede na kausapin. So pag hindi madaan sa usapan, di pwede rin nila i-enforce yung kanilang otoridad bilang mayroong sariling police.
Now, take note from that, Kong Sam, should government even engage in dialogue with the BIFF? Should they even consider that as a possibility?
Actually, ito sa pag-uusap na to, no? They have reached out, no, to the other groups. Because peace talk should be inclusive. Hindi pwedeng MIL lang ang ating kausap dito. And yun nga nakikita natin dito, kakulangan dito sa pag-uusap, no, sa usaping ito ng kapayapaan. No? Because now, BBL actually just talking peace with MILF.
MILF, yes.
Yes. MNLF left out, no? BIFF left out rin.
And
Pero
would
ang
that
sabi
mean-
ng pamahalaan, actually nag-reach out daw, pero they did not respond, no? So, yun ang problema natin eh. That's why, you know, a lot of people are pessimistic about the outcome of this BBL. No? Kasi it will just give power to one group. Kung ngayon nga, gusto ko lang sundin yung sinabi ni Kaalan na ang talagang layunin, no, eventually, kung nandoon na sa poder ang MILF, is to unite all of them. Sana nga ngayon pa lang, di ba? Ngayon pa lang, they should show already because they're the largest group accordingly. So, and mga kamag-anak nila yung BIFF, so why don't they, you know, shepherd all of these groups under one umbrella and talk peace, no? Kasi, alam mo, pag nasa nila ng poder, anong mangyayari dyan? So they will use what? Power? The might of their the resources, the might of the armed forces, of the police to descend upon all the other people. Yan ang gagawin nila kasi I don't think that makukuha nila yun, di ba? Yung through a peaceful means.
Gusto ko lang mag-response doon sa sinabi ni Congressman. Actually, yung pag-unite doon sa iba't ibang grupo, nasimulan na yan ng MILF. Kung ating natatandaan, ang Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, mayroon silang binuo, that was last year, na Bangsamoro Coordinating Forum, kung saan membro ang MILF, membro ang MNLF. Nandoon yung mga MNLF commander. Oo. sila ay nagkaisa na pag-usapan, iupo kung ano man yung gusot na hindi pinagkakaunawaan. Sinasabi nung iba na bakit yung ibang MILF, bakit mayroon na tayong kasunduan kung saan tinawag na 1996 final peace agreement.
Yes.
Bakit pa tayo, oo, dapat tapusin ito. Pero mismo ang OIC, ang broker noong pag-usap na yon, nakita natin noong permahan noong 1996, if I may remember right, na nandito yung Secretary General ng OIC. Siya yung sumaksi doon sa lagdaan na ginanap between Ms. Wari and the former President Ramos. So ngayon, nandiyan naman yung OIC. May effort sila na i-convene. Actually, na-convene na nila several times yung Bangsamoro Coordinating Forum sa Saudi Arabia, sa Jeddah last year, several times here in Manila. Marami ring pagtitipunan na ano dito para i-address kung ano man yung hindi pagkakasunduan diyan. Isa pa diyan na pwede natin sabihin na positive impact nitong pakikipag-usap ng MILFs doon sa ibang MNLF naman. Nakita natin yung iba't ibang faction diyan. Yung faction ni Abul Khair Aloto, who is the chairman now of the MNLF. Yung faction ni former Mayor Muslimin Sema, na talagang sumusuporta diyan sa Bangsamoro Bisiklop.
All right. So do you think, and I can ask both of you, Kong Sam and Kabangsa Alan, do you think that by dealing with just the MILF, effectively we're disuniting or we're causing factions among our Muslim brothers sa South? No? I think because, as you mentioned earlier, because we're dealing with MILF lang, yung deal is with MILF, and therefore the other factions are going to be feeling left out. But before you answer that, we need to take a short break. Don't go away. When we come back, the final points of our guests and the results of our online poll on the issue. Stay tuned. You're watching Opposing Views. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. With me is Malu Tiquilla, and you're watching Opposing Views. Our guest, Congressman Samuel Pagdilao of the Anti-Crime and Terrorism Community Involvement and Support, or ACT CIS Party List, and Alan Balangi, lead convener of the 1BANGSAmoro movement. And our question for this evening, are you in favor of the government's all-out offensive against the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters? Now, just before we took a break, I was addressing this question to both of you, Kabangsa Alan and Kong Sam. If we deal with MILF, assuming it's signed, the BBL is signed, are we not causing more division and therefore perhaps inviting more conflict, considering that the other groups, the MNLF, BIFF, and other, perhaps the private armies, feeling left out in the conversation? It's only with the MILF that we're dealing with. And so I think that's the apprehension of a lot of people. I'm sure it's nice to sit down and talk and have an agreement, but then what happens then if our Muslim brothers are divided? You first, Kong Sam.
Yeah, actually we expressed in Congress, kasi in one of the deliberations, where we invited the peace panel as our resource persons, we asked this, why is it that this peace talk only deals with one group? It should be an inclusive, in short, it should involve all the stakeholders, especially all the other groups who are also Muslims. Okay? So, ang sabi nila, naimbitahan naman daw, pero hindi lang sumama. So that's where the problem is, ayaw sumama, sa pag-uusap ng kapayapaan. Of course, the MNLF, meron silang position dahil sabi nila, meron ng peace agreement. Hindi ito patapos, because there are certain provisions that still, meron pang dapat i-comply, i-fulfill dun sa mga provisions yan to really give peace a chance, following that model or that template. So meron rin silang, ngayon, effectively, ang sabi kasi, which is dangerous proposition, is that, it's better, since MILF is the strongest amongst all these groups in Mindanao, amongst the Muslim people, So it's better to deal with this,
They can cause
parang pag you're doing
the most
away,
damage, no?
Oo,
Yeah.
parang you're doing away with one problem, setting aside one problem with a bigger
Which is
group.
the
That's
biggest
good enough. Parang yun ang sinasabi, which is, dapat hindi. Diba? Dapat talaga we really should strive, put our best foot forward to be able to rally everybody, like 1BANGSAmoro, people in the peace table and talk peace. No? So ngayon, by favoring one group, do you think you are creating division amongst the Bangsamoro people? I think so. No?
So, Boss Alan, anong take mo doon? Kasi yun nga, the deal is with just the MILF. Hindi all-inclusive eh. So, but you are in support of the BBL, pero then it's not inclusive, di ba?
Actually, tama yung sinabi ni Congressman na in-invite naman yung mga yan. Some are, reluctant na sumama doon sa usapan. Yung iba naman, sumama. Mayroon din naman, baga, nagbabantay lang kung ano yung magiging kahinatnan. Siguro, pag maganda yung takbo ng usapan, pag okay yung BBL, baka sumama na rin sila.
Tingin mo, posible yun?
Posible yun.
Once nagkaroon na ng BBL, tingin mo, pwede mag-usap ang BIFF and MILF na magsama-sama na tayo, pagtulungan na natin to?
Tama po yun. Pwede
Pwede,
mangyari. Kasi itong mga taga Mindanao, kung ating babalikan, the government has been negotiating for peace for many decades now. Almost 5 decades na eh. Oo. But it is still refused and still refuses to give what is due to the Muslim. Itong mga to, ang tagal na pinagkaitan ng panahon. Oo. They were left behind. Alam natin yan lahat. Kaya nga, inaabol natin ito. Kaya nga, laking pasalamat namin actually sa gobernong ito. Sila lang yung nagbigay ng sinseridad, yung commitment na i-pursue itong Bangsamoro Basic Law. Ang tingin namin, lalong-lalo na yung mga kabataan. Nung isang araw, may kinausap akong kabataan. Sabi ko, ano bang tingin mo dito sa Bangsamoro Basic Law? Yung 12 years old, alam na niya kung ano yung nararamdaman niya. Ang sinagot niya sa akin, ang sabi niya, di ba nagkakagira ngayon sa Mindanao? Sabi ko, hindi naman siguro. Oo, ano lang yan. Oo, ang tanong niya sa akin, hanggang kailan maghihintay? Hanggang kailan magtitiis? Ilang pangulo pa, sabi niya, ang kailangan dumaan para lang makuha natin yung inasam-asam na kapayapaan dyan sa Mindanao. Kung saan, kung titingnan natin yung Mindanao, ang panawagan ko dun sa mga taong palagi na lang sinasabi na girahin yung Mindanao. Itong mga taong ito, hindi man lang naka-experience yan ng gira. Ako, nung kabataan ko, na-experience ko yan. Yung lugar namin, actually, hindi yun yung tinatamaan mismo ng gira. Pag dumadaan yung mga helicopter na nandun kami sa eskwelahan, kami takot na takot. Buti kami na bigyan ng pagkataon na makapag-aral pa dito sa Manila. Eh, yung iba, kaya nga, some are napilitan talaga na sumama dyan sa mga armadong grupo kahit ayaw nila. Wala silang choice. Kundi sumama dyan, sa tingin nila, yun yung paraan upang ipagtanggol yung kanilang mga karapatan at upang singiling yung pagkakataon na makuha yung inaasam-asam na kapayapaan dyan sa lupang pangako sa Mindanao.
Alam mo, Rod, ako, taga Mindanao rin ako. I was born in Cotabato City and I grew up in General Santos until I finished high school. Talaga ang conflict, talagang napakahirap niyan. It's going to displace a lot of people. Pero alam nyo, yung ating pamahalaan, kasi Mindanao, hindi lang naman Muslim na yan, marami na rin Kristiyano yan.
Tama po yan.
Okay. May mga local governments, di ba? Bawat probinsya, bawat lalawigan, at nagkaroon pa ng ARMM na kung saan ibinuhos rin ng ating pamahalaan na yung mga pondo dyan. So that these people, through their own leaders, their chosen leaders, will make it their own responsibility to be able to develop and provide for their people.
Right.
Pero nagkamali. Bakit hindi? Up to now, bakit hindi pa nangyayari yung development at pag-unlad ng mga lugar? But some places in Mindanao, nag-i-improve, di ba? Through their leaders.
Definitely when it comes to this all-out offensive there, we can all, I guess, agree or disagree, but I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that peace is primordial.
Yes.
We all want peace. No? Well, perhaps, unfortunately, we have a few minutes left no, for final words. Just a quick summary, no? Kabangsaran, just a quick summary po ng message nyo sa ating viewers regarding this. Very
Unang-una po, dapat talimain natin kung ano talaga yung mensahe ng kapayapaan. Isipin din natin kung ano yung nangyayari diyan ngayon sa Mindanao. Yung mga kabataan natigil sa pag-aral, more than 20,000 na yung natigil sa pag-aral. Ang evacuate natin ngayon, yung mga evacuees, ay umabot na ng more than 40,000. Nadeklara nga dyan yung state of calamity. So, afterwards, na ceasefire na, ano ba ang mararamdaman ng mga tao na hindi naman na-experience doon? So yan yung aming panawagan na kumbaga talasan natin yung ating pag-iisip. Yung Bangsamoro Bisiklon na yan, yung hindi pa nakakarinig, ang naririnig lang ay yung mga komento sa radio at television, hindi naman nila sinaleksi kung ano yung nilalaman. Dapat alamin muna nila bago sila magsalita. Kasi kami, mga taga Mindanao, kaya sumusuporta dito, talagang nakonsulta kami, tingin namin dumaan ito sa mahusay at masusing proseso, tinalima namin. Dahil ang gumawa niyan, hindi lang naman MILF. Kung ating natatandaan, ang Bangsamoro Transition Commission, pinapalooban ng 15 commissioners, yung 7 dyan, ang pumili dyan ay ang ating Pangulo. Yung 8 ay galing sa MILF yan. Kaya sinasabi natin, dumaan ito at sa proseso at tinalima ng taong bayan.
Okay, maraming salamat, Kabangsaalan.
Maraming salamat po.
Kong Sam, very quickly.
Yeah, I'm for peace, no, not war. I'm for a community where Muslims and Christians will live peacefully, devoid of atrocities or crimes committed by lawless elements. So this offensive that's being carried on by government against lawless elements must be pursued, to secure a society where there will be more peace-loving Filipinos, Muslims and Christians alike living together. So I think the essence and the message is, let's work together. No? I mean, Mindanao can be a place where Muslims and Christians can live peacefully. As I lived before, kasi yung neighborhood ko doon, doon lahat, may mga Muslims, mayroong mga Kristiyano. We're living peacefully back in the 70s.
That's right. Okay. Thank you very much, Congressman Sam. So again, thanks to our guest, Congressman Samuel Pagdilao of the Anti-Crime and Terrorism Community Involvement and Support ACT CIS Partylist, and Alan Balangi, lead convener of the 1BANGSAmoro movement. And thank you also, Malu Tikia. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Now let's see the results of our online poll. We asked you, are you in favor of the government's all-out offensive against the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters? Those who answered yes, they are in favor of all-out war, 60%, or all-out offensive rather, 60%, and those who answered no, 40%. And that's our opposing views for tonight. Tune in again next week for another bold and engaging discussion of today's most relevant issues. I'm Rod Depomuceno. Good night. God bless. Happy weekend.